Hello and welcome to the podcast. We are here today with Ryan Green, Senior Partner and Head of Yacht Management, Lorraine Hanrahan, Yacht Manager, and Harry Chapman, Yacht Management Assistant, to talk about our new project, Sustainable Seas, launching imminently from Burgess. We often use these podcasts to engage experts in their field, so today it's time to turn the spotlight on some of our own Burgess experts. Since we started Blue Oceans back in 2018, we have had a plan and made efforts to help the yachts we work with reduce their environmental footprint, but we have never managed to make it a systematic and structured approach. So for me personally, and for many of the people working on this project, it's been really exciting. Lorraine, please then, can you tell us a bit more about Sustainable Seas and how it came about?
So one of the things we did in the beginning was to create a mission statement, which is as follows. Our mission is to establish an environmental standard for the superyacht industry, focusing on sustainability through education, collaboration, and guidance.
And who doesn't love a mission statement? That is a great one. But what does this actually mean? What is it? Is it a handbook? Is it a project? Is it a program? Is it a plan?
It's all of the above. It's everything and more. So, we've got the handbook, which we'll expand on, but the bottom line is, it is a framework that can be adopted on board boats in full or in part to create a set of standards on board that align with the wider industry efforts to improve our environmental position in the industry.
For example, the handbook is a collection of industry best practices that we have collated from across the industry, from our team, from experience within Burgess, something that obviously we're hoping to add to over time with the help of the crew feedback, with the help of feedback in wider teams, not just yacht management.
Fantastic. So we start with a base level handbook that we have built over time with input from all sorts of our team who are ex-crew, and it's going to be an evolution over a number of years.
One of the things we've done is try to create a handbook that aligns with our SMS. So we've taken our SMS and we have created the environmental tips to work alongside some of the procedures that we have in place already. And the Sustainable Seas Handbook will sit in our SMS on Burgess Manage.
Okay, so that feeds into the next question I had really, which is how does Sustainable Seas go beyond the environmental crew guidelines that have already been in circulation for a couple of years now?
That's a great question, George, and it's something that when we first approached this, it was all about implementation. The environmental crew guidelines are phenomenal. And the next step, and I think the responsibility of us as managers and operators, was how we're going to get this on boats, how we're going to leverage what we do in the office into a framework that is easily understood and implemented on board. And so to that end, and following what Lorraine said, we looked at the SMS. Here is a framework on board that yachts are familiar with. There is some level of implementation, whether it be mini ISM in the sub 500 ton sector or full ISM in the over 500 ton sector. It was a useful place to start. And so we've written this or developed the Sustainable Seas program to align with that. Now, I think the key thing here is that it's not going to detract or dilute the purpose or functionality of the ISM code or SMS and how it's implemented on board. All we've done is we've mimicked the framework so that it's easy for yachts to understand and implement. And I think that's crucial, is its elegance is in its simplicity and using systems that people are already familiar with.
Brilliant. That is really good to know. And for the uninitiated, SMS stands for
Safety Management System.
Thank you very much. We love an acronym here.
And just going back to your point on the Water Revolution Foundation, first of all, we wanted to give huge kudos to the Water Revolution Foundation and all the sponsors that were involved in that. And our particular thanks to Danella Hopkins for the work that she's put into with the environmental crew guidelines. We have done a couple of podcasts already with Danella. It's been very informative and it's been very insightful for the next step, which was our launch of the Sustainable Seas Handbook. We've used both those guidelines for a springboard to launch our handbook.
And so the environmental crew guidelines were released by Water Revolution, first of their kind really for the industry, weren't they? Open source, free of charge, sent out to all, asking and encouraging people and crews to adopt them. And I think what's come through everything that we've done so far has been that this really has to be a collaborative process, doesn't it, across the industry to make change happen.
And communication all boils down to that, just leveraging every single platform we have and getting the word out there. We're not precious about the proprietary nature of things. This is something that we all have an obligation to work with and to ensure is available. The same way that the environmental crew guidelines were made open source, I think we're very much in line with doing the same thing. Obviously, yachts in our managed fleet will be early adopters, and they'll help us to develop the Sustainable Seas program. But at the same time, we're not holding on to it and keeping it exclusively for Burgess clients. And I think that's really an important part of it.
So that leads us really nicely onto that idea of early adopters. Harry, you have been responsible for our first big steps externally, a soft launch with a small group of yachts, variously referred to as the Eco Fleet, the early adopters, and my favourite, Harry's Fleet. Harry, can you tell us more, please?
Absolutely. We knew from the beginning, starting this project, that this would have to be a collaborative project with the yachts and with the managed fleet we work with. Before we even rolled it out, we've been working with yachts on helping their environmental practices and sustainability on board, and we knew yachts that were more interested from the beginning. So when we first wanted to issue this handbook, it made sense to go to them first. And luckily, we had a great range of yachts that were already interested. I think we've got a 37-metre private yacht in there, all the way up to a 80-metre plus world cruising, fully commercial yacht. So we really get the spectrum of feedback across all itineraries and operations, which is really great. So we've given them the handbook initially, and feedback is coming through, which is really great. And it's just been really well received. And we knew, as well as working with the yacht crew, that we had to get feedback, and it wasn't going to be perfect first time. So this sort of first launch to a group of yachts we knew were interested, it is a great first step to advance the project.
And super exciting after months and months and months of work behind the scenes. When the first message said it's gone out, that is a big moment. So, yeah.
And then, we're a team that are really interested in this project and have been working on it for a long time. So, as you say, it was really exciting when it first went out.
And feedback, what's the initial feedback been like then?
It's been really positive because it's a very comprehensive guide and a really good handbook covering all aspects of operational yachting. It's going to take time to get the feedback coming through. But initial phase, really positive. Captains are really excited. They're going to be passing it around the different departments, and they're just keen to see a management company is getting involved in this, not just on the cruise. So I think it's going to be really well received, hopefully. So
we've got feedback coming in, and I assume we've got a team working on that to adopt that now before we go.
We do. So it's going to be, this initial stage of feedback is great before we launch to our wider managed fleet, but it will also be a working document. This sort of task force and focus group, they're not going to go away. We're going to be relying upon them throughout this project to sort of give us feedback and helping us to progress the project as it develops.
To that point then, other yachts, can they join Harry's fleet, or actually we're saying...
No, absolutely. We highlighted the yachts we knew were already interested, but I'm sure there are yachts out there that would like to be involved. As soon as they get this, they're going to want to be interested, help us more, which is great. We just haven't identified them at this stage. So any feedback at all is really great throughout the project.
And it's going to be just a continual loop of input and improvement as we go. And that is where the SMS comes in.
Absolutely. The successful implementation of the SMS, crucial to that is the feedback loop. So many parts of that are about constructive reporting back to the company and so on. And so working with yachts in Harry's fleet, there's already that capability built into the sort of the mindset on board, is feeding information back to the management company then consolidating, reviewing, and then applying those changes to a wider fleet. And so that, again, that structure is already in place. And so, there are mediums through which the vessel can communicate with us, and we can effectively implement change to refine the system. And I think one other key aspect, which Harry mentioned, was the size of the fleet that he's working with. There's no barriers to entry for this. Larger boats will have a wider level of implementation, but then smaller yachts, even chase boats that we're working with, it's applicable. That's the key thing. And then you can cherry pick from those guidelines what is applicable to the vessel you're on. And there's no right or wrong at all. It's more about the effort and the focus on getting these things done and best fit. So we're operating in that space of best fit for the vessel you're operating on.
Definitely.
We're particularly interested in hearing back from vessels if they're doing something slightly different to some of the suggestions made in the handbook, because with their permission, we can share those suggestions to other vessels in the fleet and move forwards with our work towards sustainability. So any tips and feedback is very welcome. We do have a dedicated email address, which is sustainableseas@burgessyachts.com. So we are encouraging anyone to feedback with any of their tips that we might be able to add to the handbook.
And I think that's clear. This project is going to succeed because it's going to be a team effort, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the adoption in Harry's fleet is phenomenal. And the crew are putting in the effort. From our perspective, as it evolves, our auditors are going to get on board with it. And when they start visiting boats to conduct their formal audits, they will take some time to actually review what's being implemented on board. And that'll be another means by which we can disseminate the information. They will be getting info from the compliance team and they can feed that back onto the boats, look at best practice, and then also what's happening on the boats, immediately refer it back to the team that's developing Sustainable Seas. So it's a win-win from both sides.
Now, here's a tricky one. If there's one thing we know, it's that crew are time poor, especially as that season starts to ramp up. But equally, we also know they generally do want to run a better boat and play an active part in looking after our ocean. I mean, we're often in offices, but they're the ones on board every single day looking at that ocean. Every time we do engage with the stews, the deckies, the department heads, we get really positive message about what they want to do. So in practice, how is this really going to work on board?
I mean, one of the things we want to avoid, we already know that we ask the vessels for a lot of paperwork and feedback from an ISM point of view and, part of the SMS. We don't want this to feel like it's more work. Of course, on a certain level, it's going to feel like that because there's a handbook. However, that was one of the reasons we wanted to roll it out as a non-mandatory optional addition to the SMS that they can use the small tips from and work with on board, and to make it achievable. So it's just one small change at a time, one change per month, one change per quarter. It's a combination of all the small changes they can make on board with the support of the crew, with the support of yacht management that leads to the bigger changes overall.
And looking forward, we are presumably only talking about a matter of time before more regulation and requirement is introduced into our maritime industry and yachting in particular. That's
a great point, George, and that's something that I think we're going to be spearheading. The regulatory framework that we adopt on board vessels and so on, it comes down from the IMO and various authorities. And oftentimes there is very little consultation. Certain areas, others, there is some level of consultation. But I think as an industry, we will be at the coalface of this development. And what I would really like to see is the regulators coming to us. As we develop this, they come to us and say, how should we do this? How can we adopt what you're doing into the wider maritime sector? What areas? And I think that's really going to be something of a paradigm shift, because as it's always been a trickle down from the top, we're going to be doing it, and we will have best practice reinforced on boats with objective evidence. And then that can start moving into the development of regulation. But because of the passion and the commitment of the people involved, we're not going to need regulation to enforce it on board yachts and in our sector. I think it'll be a natural uptake. So, to be honest, it's going to be, new ground. I think there's a lot that flag states and so on will probably be looking to us. We have very, very productive relationships with all the flag states, Marshall Islands, Cayman Islands, and so on and so forth. And I think, we're going to start sort of working with them and prompting them on this. This is what we're doing. What are you going to do about it?
I think you only had to look at the Monaco Yacht Show last year in 2024, where they had a whole sustainability hub, which was a 2-floor conference centre with constant talks throughout the 4 days. And some of the discussions, particularly with class, were in the fledgling stages, but you can see which direction this is going to go in. And we need to be a part of that. We need to be ahead of that.
And I think that's, to sort of come back to Water Revolution Foundation, that's what they've also identified early on and said this has to be a collaborative industry-wide effort if it's going to get ahead of the the power curve and start driving change.
And I think we've also built our Sustainable Seas team around that a bit as well, where we've got people from all different departments. We've got some technical team in there, some yacht managers, and it's great to see a really collaborative front at Burgess as well.
Yeah, I think that's where, it's probably quite important. We're not only asking yachts to put all the effort in here. There's been so much volunteered from so many people within Burgess, particularly in the yacht management team, Harry, Lorraine, the compliance team, the technical team, and so on, is that this is gratis time that everyone has given to produce this, which I think is phenomenal. And I think it's a reflection on our commitment. Our auditors providing some of their time while they're on board the vessels. And, that all comes from the very top. I think it's a reflection on the shareholders' approach to this, and their commitment is that the resources are there and use them, which I think is, again, also something that I would almost challenge everyone in the yachting industry, all other businesses in the yachting industry to commit to that level.
And let's say, a lot of this work has also come from people who used to work on boats. In fact, I'm the odd one out sitting in this room.
That you are.
Get my coat. But this has come from people who know, working with people who know and are doing it right now. So we've covered what Burgess are doing, what we're going to do. We've covered what we're asking of yacht crew and how we're going to work with them. That means that the missing part of the puzzle then is how we are going to get owners and guests interacting with this programme. Harry, do you want to take us in there?
It's a really great point, because the feedback across from the sort of initial eco fleet or my fleet has been really positive, but they also want to make sure that the owners are on board and that they're interested, that if the crew are proposing changes on board, that the owners are happy with those and it's been communicated with it. And it's a developing project and challenge, potentially, keeping owners involved, but it's one that's really important.
And also, I think it's super important for us to inform owners about it, because oftentimes the maritime sector, or even what happens on board yachts and so on, is hidden behind a bit of a veil of mystery. They're incredibly technical, and so on and so forth. And sort of owners, really do they penetrate that? And we've got to tell them what's going on, what we're doing. And the majority of owners that I've spoken to about this, first and foremost, it's new to them, and secondly, they're blown away. They're absolutely on board. And that's where we're going to sort of exercise our platforms and things to make sure this is clearly communicated.
It's fair to say then that in these conversations, a part of this is about making it a really positive conversation. Probably in the past, making changes for environmental reasons is seen as a bit of a backward step, or it's not going to be as good, or these products aren't as good, or it's yachting, I don't want to have this environmental conversation. But we are turning that on its head, aren't we? We are saying this is a positive move for change.
Absolutely. And we have some vessels where they're already informing their owners that they're using environmental products on board. They may have a sheet printed off in the guest handbook, in the guest cabins, that explains what they're doing on board, that gives options for other incentives that guests can sign up to, whether it's changing of the towels, the sheets less frequently. They can opt to cruise at a lower speed to save on emissions. We also have a donation programme at Burgess, which we ask the owners to contribute to as part of our budgeting, should they wish to, which involves an annual donation to Marine Conservation Programme, which contributes and feeds back to preserving the ocean.
So this is really operational and an element of philanthropy. And am I right in saying, and you in the management team will tell me, the biggest single change anyone can make right now, today or tomorrow, is actually just going slower?
Economical cruising speed. I mean, that's a podcast in itself.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And no, you're absolutely right, Georgina. It is such an important consideration, and something that is always a precious commodity, both on board and day-to-day operations, and as far as owners are concerned, is time. And one of the ways to gain some time back during a cruise is to go slightly faster. However, with careful planning considerations and so on, a little more focus. This is that marginal gain space, insofar as your planning goes and your scheduling is, cruising at 1 or 1.5 knots slower can significantly reduce your fuel consumption. And I think this is an education piece. This is where, the captains or the senior leadership on board, when they're talking to owners about that, I bet you many owners aren't aware. They may think that cruising at 1600 RPM versus 1700 RPM adjusts your fuel consumption by a similar percentage. But in certain configurations, you could see 15 or 20% higher fuel consumption just to gain that extra knot. And I think if owners were aware of that, they'd probably be a lot more conscious about telling the captain to, to get there at all costs. So that's a huge one. And then other things like the AC as well,
Hotel load.
Yeah. Air conditioning the Mediterranean, that's leaving the doors open and, significant hotel load, and that's a fuel burn. And we're not saying that we're going to restrict air conditioning to certain hours of the day, but it's just about consideration for how spaces are ventilated, where the doors are left in the sort of open position or if they're timed to automatically close. And again, we don't want to infringe on operations as well. I'm sure, from my experience, there's probably 100 crew listening to this going, oh, but what about X, Y, and Z? That's fine. Doesn't affect the operation. Just think about it. That's the key thing here, is consider it. It's never been in the sort of the industry narrative 10, 15 years ago, but now it is. And small changes can make huge gains.
Have a look, have a think. Let's see what we can do. So this is a management-led program, and we have focused so far on the management fleet yachts, but clearly we have multiple touch points across Burgess, a strong 360-degree service offering with charter, brokerage, new build, insurance, means we are touching, one way or another, a lot of yachts. So how are we planning to engage, for instance, the 100 yachts that we represent for charter, where we're not on an SMS system, or yachts that we represent for sale, or yachts that simply take insurance or crew services?
From a charter perspective, we already have a couple of our team on the Sustainable Seas working group, one from retail, one from management. That will increase over time.
They're pretty excited.
Really excited.
Aren't they?
Yeah. So, a good percentage of those yachts are part of the managed fleet as well. We've got an overlap of 50.
It's about 50%, yeah.
So they will have access to Burgess Manage. For those that don't, we're sort of looking at phase 2 of this project, which will be a stronger rollout to charter, and that will focus on the owners area, where they'll be able to still have access to the Sustainable Seas Handbook, albeit not in the SMS Burgess Manage format.
So the owners area being the owners area of the Burgess website.
Yes, yeah. So that's been rolled out recently, and so clients, owners, reps, owners, captains have access to an area, covers everything from charter schedules, technical reports, ISM, ISPS reports, finances, and so on. It's all accessible. And so it's a really good platform to bring important news in a comfortable format for an owner or stakeholder to review. It's not going to get lost in an inbox or something like that.
Yes.
It's pertinent. We can adjust its position on the page. So when they log in, it's front and center. And I think that's really going to be one of our most useful tools for getting this out there.
The volume of information being shared at the moment is just high. So getting this into a simplified and targeted communication is key, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's not going to be the only medium that we use. Going back to Lorraine's comment on the charter fleet, we produce a number of different fleet circulars across all the disciplines, from yacht management, whether it's safety, security, finance, operations, etc. And we do create versions of those for non-managed vessels, but just as memos, as information units for boats to do with as they wish. We are very careful not to impinge on other management companies and so on, but it's just key information that should be available to all. And this perfect case in point is the work we're doing here, the handbook. As I said earlier, we're not precious about proprietary information. It's all about getting it out there. And, we're happy to work with other companies as well to demonstrate how we've leveraged our platform to get this out there. And there it is. It can be mimicked.
And also it's really important to know that the handbook is chaptered and it's split in a really good way, that if we know that owners of yachts are interested in certain sections, we can focus on that for them, for sure. And it can be digestible in a really good way.
It's also worth mentioning Burgess Procurement, who we're working closely with to source sustainable uniform, for example. They've got a great list of contacts that will be able to source sustainable uniform for crew that are interested in that, and more sustainable suppliers throughout the industry. Anything really that we can move in that direction, Burgess Procurement are helping with.
And we're leveraging economies of scale here. If you go back a few years when these products first started hitting the shelves, they were prohibitively expensive. And it really did create a barrier to entry. Not that, there was a reluctance, but at the same time, where boats are being run on a fairly tight budget and so on and so forth, it does become a problem. But the more boats that get involved, the more boats that buy these products, the cheaper they can be. We can start utilizing our scale to bring down the cost, and then it gains its own momentum. And then, ideally, we can get these products to a price point that's equal to or better than the less sustainable products that are out there. And I think that's another huge challenge that the industry needs to face head on.
Yeah, making it a standard, an industry norm where you automatically want to and can go for the better product has got to be, it's a no-brainer in the context of what we're doing, really, isn't it? And the exciting thing is there are now so many companies doing that and making it easier to have that conversation, to make the change, to try something. I'm going to ask the question that I want to answer, but I'm going to be quiet on it. We've talked a lot about what we're doing. We've talked a lot about time being a key commodity. We've talked actually about how difficult it is sometimes just to make change happen. Why is this really important now?
I think we all have a responsibility for ocean health, and it's up to all of us to play a part and take action now.
Yeah, and I'd say that yachting is an ever-evolving industry, and moving forward, it's really important to keep up to date, and these problems, they're not going away, and we have to be at the front of this and helping our boats in any way that we can, really.
I think from my perspective, super yachts attract a lot of undesirable attention. Being at the very pinnacle of the marine industry, it is often aligned with excess and waste. But it is part of the marine leisure industry. It's just at that very far end of the scale. And, we can't draw a line through our industry based on the broader environmental consciousness and dismiss it as a whole based on that perception. So it is crucial that the industry starts demonstrating to the rest of the world that it's here to stay, but it is going to make a conscious effort, and it will do the right thing, and it will also employ the passions of the people that are in the industry. I think that's the key thing here, is that people get into yachting because they're passionate about it. They started sailing on oppies or whatever the case may be when they were young, and it's a lifelong passion, and it's one of the few industries in the world where you can make your hobby your job. And to that end, we're tapping into that passion. We're all passionate about it, for goodness sake. And it would be silly of us not to do this because, we're leveraging a fairly strong supply, a good commodity of people's enthusiasm and passion for the industry to make it better.
And we have a real chance then to take some leadership in this as well. As an industry, I've always thought the potential within this small niche industry to lead R&D and to lead innovation is huge. It's just about gathering it together.
Yeah, consolidating, getting everyone working together. It's a very, very powerful tool.
So, to conclude where we are today, this is really just the beginning of a huge framework that's going to be rolled out across multiple media, including future podcasts that tackle elements of the handbook and elements of everyday operations on board, one step at a time. Our next podcast is going to feature crew who've been involved in the early adoption and testing of what we've already rolled out, because it is really important that we hear from the people on board about what's going on right now and how they see this happening. We all have a responsibility for ocean health, and we know that it's up to all of us to play a part and take action now. And what we are trying to do here is help make it that bit easier for absolutely everyone to get involved. So to be clear, this is not just about doing good and conservation and philanthropy, although that is a really important piece of the puzzle. This is also about running a modern, forward-looking, sustainable yacht operation that's fit for the challenges of the 21st century. And to that end, we really hope that at least one element of what we've talked about today resonates with every one of you who's tuned in. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us. We've now just got one final ask. Please be part of this conversation. Please share. Please think about what you can do and what you can encourage others to do. Please tell your own networks. Please stand up and lean in. We can all be part of something really exciting, and best of all, we can do it together.